Good afternoon. This is Malcolm Boyd from Our World Media Magazine, and we are at the 2018 Rainbow Push Coalition Black Wall Street Summit, and I am here with James Felton Keith. He is the chairman of the International Data Trade Association. He is also running for U.S. Congress out of the 13th District. Those of you who are not familiar with the 13th District, that would be Harlem. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good to be here with you.
Yeah. This is a young man like yourself, you know, you're pretty sharp and whatnot. Anything you'd like to share with our viewers coming to, just make a statement?
Sure. Well, I mean, it's great to be here at this Economic Empowerment Conference. The cornerstone of our race and the reason we got it in the first place is because we think we have a brand new method to close the wage gap and ensure sort of equity for all, at least here in the United States, through policies that we've been passing everywhere else. So my background is as an engineer and economist, and I advocate for establishing right oftentimes the majority of the globe's cybersecurity policy, whether it's here or in Europe or East Asia or South Asia. And in doing that, we think we stumbled upon a new opportunity to offer people more equity to the economic productivity in our economy. And we do that through offering folks ownership rights over the data that institutions take in on them. So the majority of the corporate productivity that we see in the Western world right now is based on people's input. And so the way economists like me establish economic productivity is as a measure of inputs. And so the core reason that we're running for office in the 13th District, which includes Harlem, is to change data and cyber policies that give individuals like yourself outright ownership of their information so that they can make a legal argument that the corporate productivity that we see happening in this country, some of it is owed to them.
Right. So in other words, sounds like you kind of fall back to the old saying, money solves all problems?
I wouldn't say money solves all problems, but I think it will definitely help us solve other problems. So I think one of the biggest disparities we see right now is, our economic productivity is exponentially grown based on yesterday and days before that. But, and as a result of that, the country is a lot richer, but so few of us have access to it. And as a result, we're losing access to programs that we would normally fund via taxes to prop up our lives, And those are programs like affordable housing, healthcare, and education. We can't really facilitate housing, healthcare, and education as either a human right or as a government luxury because we don't have funds in the system.
Right.
So we think that a new way to better distribute funds into the system is by distributing it specifically to individuals and allowing the system to grow because we grow incomes. So our objective is to grow folks' income.
Okay. So you say you win. Mm-hmm. You're a new U.S. Congressman out of Harlem, 13th District.
Sure.
There's a how can I phrase this question? There's a community, our people specifically,
Sure.
who just don't get it economically.
Sure.
We're so used to the handouts and what can you do for me? What do we do for them? How do we get them to understand that, you are in control of your own destiny?
Sure. Well, I think the rhetorical conversation is separate from the policy. So this isn't necessarily something that people need to understand mechanically to get their piece of the pie. This is something that we're going to set in the legislation. It's just like when we extract taxes from wages or redistribute those taxes as government revenues to prop up housing, healthcare, and education. We're going to do that no matter what for them. In fact, whether I win or not, our will has already been done. We've been passing policies that facilitate this right now. But there's still an opportunity there, specific to your question, to have a conversation with everyday people about the fact that they have an intrinsic value and the fact that they should own that value. And the fact that really institutions, whether they're for-profit or non-for-profit or governmental, they're really building their value on the literal backs of people, of all people. And they're doing it via the data that they extract from your back. It's not just your social media information. I'm talking about your finance info, your insurance info, your location info, and where you are right now, and most importantly, your healthcare info. You know, so as we digitize everything that we are as physical beings, the only conversation that we have to have with, you know, our people, the people in our districts, the people in our neighborhoods, is the fact that they are due more on the economic productivity that we are all participating with. So the conversation we have with them is, what are your problems? And how do we start to fix those methodologically? How do we allocate more capital to those? And I think that we can do that. So I can make the capital allocation argument as long as people can speak up in an unapologetic and unfearful way about what they need fixed.
So then for those of us, because we're in the capitalist society,
Sure.
you know, it's fill up my pockets and don't worry about the next man because he's a competitor. How do we keep it from continue to grow the way it does? I get mine and so much for you.
Sure, well, I hear what you're saying. Like, I identify as a capitalist. So outside of being a super progressive, super liberal, I'm also a super capitalist. I don't like any of the socialism talk. I think the best way we distribute value to people, like you have value, we're exchanging it right here, we're learning about each other, etc., and we are forever changed as a result. But the way I would distribute your value, your economic value, is by assigning you ownership of your piece of this institution that we're making up between us. And so I think, so while identifying as a capitalist, I think to get back and have a conversation with people about the dog-eat-dog world that you explained, is we got to have a separate conversation about unity and the fact that our economics is not zero-sum. We only do well when we prop each other up to do well over the long term. If I knock you off to do better from a short-term standpoint economically, I will eventually lose. Yeah, I think it really, so our conversation, even our campaign, is really about unity, community, and the opportunities that come from it. And so I think the constant conversation that we have to be having socially and politically is about unity. And we can facilitate that via capitalism.
On that note, unity.
Yeah.
The present condition of our political scene in the country right now is total division.
Yeah.
You know, there's like, no longer is it cut down the middle, it's cut in thirds, fourths, 16ths, 24ths. We're all over the place and nobody trusts anybody and everybody's out for their own.
Sure.
How would you, as U.S. Congressman, how would you drive the conversation to get some type of unity, to get somebody some cohesion?
Sure.
You know what I mean?
So I like to always say that individuals are at their best when they can identify with the community. And communities are at their best when they can identify all of their individuals. And I think we are living in a more individualistic world than we ever have, and our technology is propelling that. But what I specifically mean is, when I say communities do best when they identify their individuals, I mean people have to be able to be totally transparent about who they are so that the community can adequately allocate funds, other resources, their value to them. And so the conversation still is about unity and how we incentivize ourselves to be more unified in our communities based on our individuality. So our opportunity really is in saying, you're rigidly you, I'm rigidly me. We have agency over ourselves. And only when we decide to cooperate well together, whether we're radically different, I mean, you and me, we'd probably be, you know, good to go in general. But if we thought that we were radically different, we have to understand as a society, and our moral regard has to be such that we understand that people have to participate well together. They have to be more unified in their communities, and that's the only way that we design opportunities. If we do not instill that message as our moral regard above and beyond whatever capitalism is, then we're doomed. And so the real push, again, behind the campaign is outside of us thinking that we have some strategic ways to get money back into the system. It really starts with a philosophical undertone, which is that we are all interconnected. We derive our value from each other. We have an intrinsic value, and we need to honor that just because you exist in physical time and space. And so that's the conversation that we're speaking until we're blue in the face to everybody about.
To be totally honest, to hear you talk in terms of economics like you're Republican, but you're Democrat.
I'm a Democrat. I'm a hardcore Democrat.
How do you make that work? How do you make that work? Because right now, excuse me, but right now, The divide between the Republicans and Democrats is the Republicans are all about money, 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 me, power, power, power.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's the vision I'm seeing.
Sure.
And it has driven the Democrats to just be totally liberal. You know, even though they're not necessarily liberal, but they just to get
You're
away
right,
from
talking about social. They going back to a century ago.
Just to scrape themselves clean of the madness that the Republicans are speaking about, they have driven themselves totally, you know, to the left.
You're right, and I think so. Other people have said that to me, and I'm most definitely, not a Republican and don't support their conservative social outlook. But I do think that it is fair, and we should be unapologetic in talking about power. So when I normally talk to people, on 145th Street and Malcolm X Boulevard, where I live, I just talk about power. I talk about, do you want some? Do you want some power? Do you want to be in play? And the best way to be in play is to be able to assign some ownership stake to yourself so that we can distribute that power to you. And power can come in a lot of forms. It can come in, physical resources, capital resources, acknowledgement from your community. If you're an influential person, let's just say because you live on Malcolm X in 145th and you a brown dude who changes culture every day by stepping outside, right? Let's say that's the case, right? Which it very well may be in a lot of situations. As you are that person, you need to be unapologetic in insisting that you get adequate allocation of your value in the world, or else it won't come to you. But that is a capitalistic thing. For me to be able to, what we're doing, and I'm an engineer and economist by trade. When I see a problem, I only look at it as a distribution problem. And so I want to distribute
Let me jump
value.
in right there.
Yeah.
Cut you off.
Sure.
Are you make U.S. Senate, Congress, excuse me, U.S. Congress. Are you ready to step across party lines if you feel that there's something that your party should support and they're not willing to support? Are you ready to say, you know what, I'm gonna put my neck out there?
Sure. What I will say is I'm ready to lead from a moral regard and from an economic regard how our party exists. I don't see much that Republicans are doing right now that would allow me to just say, hey, I'm going to go step across lines. But what I do think is that I represent a faction of the thought leadership community and the business community and the age community. I'm a millennial. I'm probably the oldest person who identifies as a millennial, but I was born in 1981. And so my process in engaging problems is I think, much different than the people who are in place right now. And so I think the objective is just to go in and lead. And if Republicans and Democrats want to converge on what we're doing, then so be it. But I think we need to be as unapologetic and as kick in the door as Donald Trump is talking right now.
Since you bring him
Sure.
up, I was trying to avoid that whole topic.
No, go into
I got
it.
a bad stomach.
Go
and it's getting worse with it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
since you bring him up, there's two things that he's done that I'm impressed with.
Sure.
Number one is he's pretty much mapped out his own agenda. He doesn't care what anybody thinks about it, has their opinion of it. I'm gonna do it this way, and he told everybody ahead of time.
Sure.
Like, hey, I'm gonna do something totally different.
Sure.
Now, to drain the swamp and all that, he hasn't kept his word as far as any of that goes.
He's made it
but
worse.
he's still on his own path.
He is on his own path. Well, and I think he grasped something much different than I think standard politicians could fathom. He saw a void in the market, and he attacked that void in the market. And he also saw that the standard way and function that political parties existed in, it just wasn't relevant anymore. Like, I can find 1 million people who think like me on Facebook right now. I don't need the party to engage them. I might need it in a primary, but if I spend enough to target those folks, I don't even need to poll them. I wrote quite a few op-eds in Wisconsin and Michigan and New York in 2016 about the methods with which he was taking his message to market, and that the Democrats need to wake up and see what he's doing and compete with that. I think we need to come to the public in just as relevant a way. I'll also say I think we should be, more unapologetic in what we want out of the world. And the reality is, if we do want to create a more integrated society, if we do want to create a more equitable society, we have to be unapologetic about being exactly who we are in politics. the most extraordinary thing to me that Donald Trump did is he came out as a bigot. And so everyone else who used to wear hoods came out. And we saw a lot of that in Charlottesville.
Excuse me.
Sure.
I hope a lot of people don't take this wrong, but I appreciate the fact that he's done that.
I hear you. As a black person, I think we can
I
all.
would rather you tell me to my face how you feel about me than to pat me on the back, and every time I turn around, you got a big knife, ready to cut my throat. At least I know what I'm up against.
When I remember somewhere, I lived in South Africa for years, for about 3 years, and, tried my first go at entrepreneurship. I failed miserably, lost a bunch of people's money, but I learned a whole lot about how the world works and how people work in particular. And I think one thing I appreciated most when I was over there is sometimes dealing with the Afrikaners who live down there. They would just tell me flat out that they didn't trust me. Not that they thought I was a bad guy. They're like, I just don't know you. You look different. You look colored, and that's what I would be classified as over there. And it's like, I can't do business with a colored guy, so I'm gonna have to pass. And I remember a meeting that I was in with a bunch of black South Africans and some black Somalis who we were all in this, coalition with during that time. And they looked at me like, are you offended? What can we do? Do we need to console you? I said, no, I actually appreciate that because I've been trying to do similar deals at home for years and getting a runaround instead of hearing, what someone honestly thinks. Not to say that everyone I was dealing with here was, an abject racist, but I think being truthful about whatever it is that you are is something that is relatively new and available to this generation. And I don't mean this generation, people who are my age and younger, but I mean people who are living in this time. I think the biggest difference between, say, millennials and baby boomers, the other, large generation, at least in America, that are pressed upon, its virtues, its values in the world, is the difference between truth and transparency. If you and I leave this conversation and we tell the truth about what happened in this conversation, it'll probably be slightly different. But because it is being recorded right now, it can at least be transparent. And so that is something that we are uniquely experiencing now, say in the past 30 years or so. And because that is so, it is only valuable for leaders of sorts to be totally transparent about who they are and what they think and their willingness to build on what they think based on their experiences with constituents of sorts. And so, so Donald Trump did kick in that door. The great thing, though, is that because he is morally corrupt, it's going to come back to bite him.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to wrap this up. Anything you'd like to share?
Sure. Specific to the campaign, everyone can go to votejfk.org. It's James Felton Keith, but everything is at votejfk.org. And our primary election is on June 26th. And so we look forward to seeing everybody out at the polls in Harlem, in Washington Heights, in Inwood, on the Upper West Side, on the Upper East Side, and in Northwest Bronx. Yeah.
And with that said, this is Malcolm Boyd, comes from Our World Media Magazine. I look at it like this. I'm sold on the young man. Number one, we do need some new, fresh, young blood out there, some new ideas. The old way is taking us off a cliff again, and it's not going to succeed. So if we can let the madman run the country, we can let this young man run hard.